Hey, Robert.
Hey, Yaron.
So last week we started talking about the application of Ingenuism principles, connection, exploration, and culture, or environment, into kind of how people should live their lives, in applying them to the individual. We've talked a lot over the last year about the world and about businesses, but I think it's important the fact is that all these principles also apply to how individuals should live their lives. So let's talk a little bit about what we mean by that. What is it? How do you apply these ingenuous principles to living your life?
Well, the opportunity as an individual is the same and different as say, in an organization, or when we think about society or the world as a whole. And that's both good and bad, because you have a lot more control over it, but you also have sole responsibility for creating or putting yourself into, in some way, supporting yourself in terms of a productive environment. And that, for me, has been, well, first of all, I've only been an Ingenuist for about 2.5 years now. But before that, I was in some ways a terrible Ingenuist, and in some ways a really good Ingenuist. But it was happenstance. It was haphazard. There were lots of areas where I did zero exploration, where I didn't trust myself, and I didn't have a solid relationship with failure. And then there were others where it just came more naturally. And that's, I think, where most people live, is where it comes naturally. They are ingenuous. They're exploring, they're discovering new things, they're learning, making decisions and deciding where to go next. And in other areas, people would maybe describe themselves, I certainly would have, as stuck. They're in one place, they don't see any opportunities for exploration, they're not making any discoveries, and they're definitely not learning.
And in some cases, they might be frozen by fear of the new, or fear of going out. They're confident in the one area, so it's easy for them because it, in a sense, comes naturally. And in other areas, it requires courage to kind of break through and challenge oneself.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's what I mean by trust in yourself. But that is, it's easy to say, and it's not always easy to do. There's also times where people they're sort of trapped in cognitive dissonance, where they're thinking, I really want this, but then they have a reason why they don't want it, and they never figure out, where that inconsistency really is, and what it is they really don't want, and how they can get what they want without suffering what they don't want. But it all comes down to being willing to explore, and then paying attention, so you're discovering things, and then learning from those discoveries, and then making your next decision in terms of what you're going to do based on those. And an example that we've used in the past is, and it's one that I use a lot because I spent a lot of my life not doing this, and I started doing it, and it really increased the quality of my life, was in terms of what I eat.
Mm-hmm.
And that's in two dimensions. One is exploring new kinds of foods and new kinds of restaurants, and not always ordering the same thing, not always going to the same place. And there's this huge asymmetry where everything you discover you have for the rest of your life, and everything that you I'll say don't discover, but really what you're doing is you're discovering a dead end. You find out that, no, in fact, I really don't like it.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to go back. And
but the loss is minimal because it's just that one meal.
And as long as you're learning, then you're having small losses and big gains. But that also applies to sort of your health and your fitness. For me, one of the things that I always did growing up was drink milk. Like, that was my go-to beverage. And it wasn't until much later in life that I was introduced to the idea of exploring how different parts of your diet impact how you feel, how much energy you have. And we took a bunch of things out of the diet, like eggs and wheat and milk and shellfish and just kind of things that you know, because none of this is in isolation. When we talk about connection, you can get an idea of, well, what are the right things to test? And what are the likely things to see if they make any difference? And for me, then you put everything back in. And for me, it became very clear when I started drinking milk again that that was a bad idea.
Yeah.
And I've been largely dairy-free since. But of course, some of that is costly. For example, not eating cheese is horrible.
I know. Ice cream, although I don't eat ice cream anymore, but ice cream. But it's interesting because
no, wait, let me go on cheese.
Finish your point. Sorry.
I
Yeah.
tried goat cheese and sheep's cheese and found that I don't like goat's cheese very much. It's not bad in some applications, but I actually like sheep's cheese and I don't have the same reaction to it. So learning and then continuing to explore and discover and trying to figure out what it is that works for you, because we all have different tastes, we all have different genetics, body, and that's really something that as an individual, Ingenuism is a good framework for helping you discover and understand.
Yeah, and of course, part of the reason you can do all this is we have kind of the knowledge that is available. I mean, you can look it up online, right? You can look up, how to deal with dietary issues, or how to test yourself, or what is the latest thinking about these things. It's this connection that exists, not connection. I mean, there's important connections to other people, but here's a connection to knowledge, connection to data, connection to other people's thinking about these things that can so enhance one's own ability to explore. I think I don't think people fully appreciate how much the internet has expanded the possibility for individuals, put aside society, companies, but for individuals to expand their life experiences, to expand, what they do with their own life, whether it's health-wise. There's so many videos and there's so many articles, and you can look up medical research, all this stuff. Or restaurants. I mean, I've discovered a lot of good restaurants because I've connected in a sense with other people who've also share the same hobby of looking for interesting food.
Exactly. And the internet has made it extremely low cost to explore. And yet, if we look at our daily lives, do we make a point of going to a new website, finding a recommendation that we trust to explore a new website, even giving it 5 or 10 minutes a day? I know the answer for me is no. And it seems crazy, but you get caught up in doing the things that you're already doing, and exploration is very easy to let it fall by the wayside.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely, and connection is also about, even the part, connection is also about people. I mean, I think we tend to be conservative about the kind of people we connect with, and because talking to people, you can learn a huge amount, and talking to people is risky. I know, I dislike it greatly when I walk into like a cocktail party or something. I know you do too. And you have to just walk up to people in the cold and talk to them and get something out of it. But there's real value in finding ways to connect to other people, connect to people you would not otherwise interact with in your daily life, and learn from people. There's a huge amount of knowledge available out there.
Yeah, that's an awesome microcosm of Ingenuism, walking into a cocktail party. And for some people, it's super easy to start talking to people. There's some conversation, or it seems risky, or it seems like a lot of work. For me, it seems like a lot of work.
Me too.
And it isn't. I mean, that's the reality, is once you do it. Now, if you talk to 10 people, are you going to make 10 lifetime friends? No. Are you going to make one? Probably not. But if you think about just from that one dimension, if you think about the possibility that it is huge versus the cost, which I would argue is still positive net expected value, even if you're just connecting with someone, it makes no sense that it would occur to me as hard. But it does. I mean, when I was living in Puerto Rico and I would go swim a few times, at least every week, there was a guy who just sort of showed up at one point, and he was swimming. And, after maybe 2 weeks, I just said, this is crazy. And so we started talking, and, he turned out to be a great guy, and,
Yeah.
we did things with him and his wife. And it's a kind of thing that it's not obvious until ex post. And then you look at, there have been hundreds of opportunities where I just let it slide by.
So it's funny because I have the same reaction to cocktail parties as you do. I don't like them. And yet, I mean, one of the differences between us is that looking back, I am a connector, right? I am a node of connection. I know a lot of people in lots of different places around the world doing lots of different things. And some of it seems like, okay, so you know a lot of people, but just from a business perspective, that has helped us in the past. That has been contributes just to the fun of traveling around the world and knowing people around the world. It just contributes in terms of just having different experiences with different people and knowing different things because you've met those people. So it's interesting. I did it without really thinking about it because, and I don't even think it comes naturally. And, I don't know how, I don't have insight into how it happened, but it did.
Well, I have a theory that you were doing something that was big enough and important enough to you. Yep. That whatever reservation you would have in a different environment about connecting with people just sort of got swamped by that commitment that you had. And there's 1,001 different ways that things can be easy, but there's 1,000,001 different ways why they can be hard. Yep. And having a practice that mimicked that is, I think, invaluable in terms of bringing Ingenuism into your personal life. And I don't even know what that is. That's one of the things that I'd like to do this year is for us to discover, what are the practices that work for us, which means trying a bunch of them and seeing whether they make any difference. And, I'm planning on enrolling Ken and Ryan in this endeavor. And because when the people around you are being Ingenuist, it just naturally feeds into your own exploration and discovery. And that's what we mean by creating an environment.
I was going to say that
part of creating an environment.
Yeah, the friends you have around you, the business partners you have around you, the environment you create in your own home and with the people around you is going to shape the extent to which you are you bring these kind of ideas into your own life and you're willing to experiment and willing to change. Yeah, I mean, I'd say that part of you coming out of your shell is probably your exposure to me, and then probably to a large extent your exposure to your wife, who is much more of an explorer than you were. So,
absolutely. And so I was lucky because I didn't set out with that as a goal. And there's no reason that I can't create that as a goal at this point in my life.
Yeah.
One of the ways that we stop exploring is we say, oh, it's too late. I could have done this if I had been thinking about it in my 20s, but now it's too late. And that's obvious nonsense.
Well, some things it's not. Kite flying, for example.
No, kite surfing still okay. Maybe hang gliding, but
hang gliding, whatever.
The exceptions are what prove the rule. There are very few things that we truly can't. I'm not saying that we should do them. In fact, I'm not even saying Ingenuism is the answer here. I mean, I want to be clear that Ingenuism is correct, but it's not a truth. It's not like gravity. There is hard to quantify, but massive value in connection, exploration, discovery, and creating an environment that supports that. And there are other models of the world that could be just as good or better at setting yourself up to succeed. But Ingenuism is, as a tautology, worth trying because it really does. It produces the kind of results that we see that Elon Musk produces that haven't ever been possible before, because we didn't have the level of connection and we didn't have an environment where the right mindset is able to take the kind of risks and reap the kind of rewards that people can today.
I think a big value here is just having people as individuals spend the time and the focus and the energy and the thought on what they want to do with their lives. I think too often life becomes just, on auto, and you drift in it. And it's that purposefulness, which a lot of people apply to their career, but often don't apply to their life. And even their career, they think within limited scope. And it's always it's never too late to, in that sense, to just, say, if, am I really, the things that I'm doing, do I really want to do them? Are these the best things that I could be doing? What else is available? What else is possible? What could I explore? What could I try? And be conscious and be purposeful about it. I think that is the great value here.
Yeah, for sure. And listening to you, it makes me think, one of the enemies of Ingenuism is over planning. Imagining that we can plan out the future and figure these things out, like, what do I want to do with my life? If you're whether you're 22 years old or 62 years old, that question is very hard to answer in a useful way, in a hypothetical, just thinking about it. But talking to people about it, learning from them, and then trying things and learning from the world as it actually is, combined with that level of thought. Because if we just try things randomly, I think there's actually value there, but the value is small compared to if you try things systematically, you learn from them, you point yourself in directions that either your experience or other people's experience suggests would be the most profitable. And I mean that in the broadest sense of the word. That is where you get the really phenomenal results out of Ingenuism.
Yeah, and all of that, accepting the fact that some of these trials and some of the paths that you take are not going to be successful. They're actually going to be failure, and this is where the whole attitude towards failure and the whole attitude towards not being successful at something is so crucial and differentiates. We know in Silicon Valley differentiates successful entrepreneurs from unsuccessful entrepreneurs is to a large extent that attitude, because you're just not going to succeed at everything.
And in a lot of situations, you're going to fail most of the time. Whether it's professionally or personally, if you're ambitious and you're taking on audacious challenges, there's going to be a lot of setbacks, and they're all going to be an opportunity to learn. And people who are both able to handle the setbacks and then learn from them, which is kind of saying the same thing, end up doing phenomenally despite those setbacks.
And that is true in business, and that is absolutely true in life as well. And
if we focused a lot on the world as a whole because we're interested in that as big pictures, and focused on Silicon Valley and business because that's a great use case or example of where these principles have made just an enormous difference. But in the end, it's always been individuals working together and to accomplish these things. And if we could snap our fingers and have everyone become an Ingenuist on the planet, it would change life as we know it in an instant. And so in a sense, maybe the way that you get what we're looking for at a societal level isn't by trying to reform the Washington and the regulatory process, but actually having Ingenuists feed into that over time until you can't really you don't know when it happened, but looking back, you're like, wow, everything is different.
Yeah, I mean, I've always thought, we get the politicians we deserve, and if you want to change the politicians, we have to change. And in that sense, there's no way to do this on a mass scale. It's kind of one mind at a time. It's one person being convinced at a time to take their life more seriously and to kind of go out there and think, explore, and connect and live a full life. That's what it's all about at the end.
Yeah, you said something last week about the contrast between European entrepreneurs and American entrepreneurs. So if you really want to change that, it's not that the schools are massively better in the US or that people are smarter, or that they are more ambitious outside of the context that they were born into. So you have to change the culture, and the only way to change the culture is, one person at a time. And then you get the culture we deserve, and the politicians we deserve, and basically everything that we have is what we actually wanted.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's all about individuals, and groups are just groups of individuals. So if you want to impact the group, you have to impact the individuals within the group. There's no other way to do it, I think, for lasting change. All right, great. You were starting to say something.
I was going to say, well, that's what we're committed to here. And so we should have, like, I don't know, an Ingenuism focus group where we're getting more input. We'll start with Ken and Ryan, but
start with Ken and Ryan. There you go.
Having a practice is often just keeping something in the forefront, which it easily falls into the background. So that's what we'll be working on and sharing in the weeks and months to come.
Sounds good. Thanks, Robert.
Thanks, Ron.
See you next week.
You're on.
Bye.